Aristotle sums up the idea of charity in one sentence. The unfortunate need people who will be kind to them. The prosperous need people to be kind to. While this concept seems so simple, philanthropy has become just as complicated and broken as the society it exists in. Keep this in mind as we discuss in a new light the New York Times editorial, "We are plotting the gift of an affordable education, something has gone wrong." While this editorial successfully discusses the failures of public policy that have necessitated a rise in philanthropy, it falls short of fully addressing the negative connotation painted around charity. This editorial missed an opportunity to explain why charity is not a suitable solution and how these cracks in government also exist in the philanthropic world. I will discuss 3 reasons why charity is ethically questionable in modern society and how each reason would have made certain claims and evidence in the New York Times editorial much stronger. Moving on to the first reason. The New York Times creates underlying negativity around the relationship between charity and policy with its diction and values. This is seen in the introductory anecdote and main claim. Regarding libraries built by Andrew Carnegie a century ago, the New York Times argues that they should be seen as, quote, monuments to the failure of public policy. A similar statement is made in the main claim, quote, Americans once again are reduced to applauding acts of philanthropy necessitated by failures of policy. This is the first instance in which the editorial aligns governmental inadequacy and charitable inadequacy without any evidence to back it up. The editorial should have elaborated on the fact that because of the rise in philanthropy at the hands of the government, the wealthy are gaining too much influence in American life. According to the Inside Philanthropy founder David Callahan, when it comes to, quote, who gets hard in the public square, ordinary citizens can't begin to compete with an activist donor class. The New Yorker notes, quote, that for every foundation that existed in 1930, there are now 500. The growth in foundation assets in that time has been even more staggering, from less than $1 billion to more than $800 billion. It is quite clear that the wealthy elite, the ones able to make these donations, are growing significantly in size and power. The government is directly behind this accumulation of power in the hands of the few, a dangerous threat to democracy which the editorial fails to address. Reason number 2. The New York Times includes a testimonial from the creator of GoFundMe, quote, we shouldn't be the solution to a complex set of systematic problems, he said. They should be solved by the government working properly. This evidence implies another downside of charity. Quote, it cuts the government slack, allowing them to continue to fail the American people socially and economically. In a BBC article, Dr. Neil Levy argues that, quote, charity can be self-defeating if it allows the state to escape some of its responsibilities. Yes, it is true that vast donations exist in part because of the failures of the government, but these donations also contribute to the lack of productive efforts by the government. In an article by the CQ researcher, Alan Greenblatt also argues that, quote, if the charity sector increases spending in an area also funded by government, then there is a risk the government will choose to spend less in that specific area. The editorial fails to portray charity and government as a parasitic relationship. While charity feeds off the failures of government, the government's life is made easier by charity. The New York Times would have made a stronger argument had they attacked both elitist philanthropy and elitist favoring government. Moving on to the third reason. The New York Times editorial was written primarily as a reaction to the large donation made to Morehouse College by wealthy financier Robert Smith. The New York Times writes that the donation was, quote, gratefully received by the new graduates of the historically black all-male Atlanta College, but their gratitude underscores the reality that hundreds of thousands of other members of the class of 2019 will be carrying unrelieved burdens of debt as they begin their adult lives. Again, the editorial implies that this charitable action is not exactly a suitable solution when you look at the bigger picture. In many instances, wealthy philanthropists do not focus on solving the entire problem, instead choosing to donate to specific politically or publicly motivated causes. According to the CQ Researcher article by Alan Greenblatt, quote, donors are passing charitable gifts to controversial and politically charged groups through anonymous donations from donor-advised funds. Charitable donations are unfair because they favor a small group, like the students of Morehouse College. A BBC study on philanthropy states that, quote, donors, not unreasonably, choose to give to causes that appeal to them, but these are not necessarily the causes where there is the greatest need. The failure of our economic system would have been better supported had these charitable donations that inspired the article been critiqued. As we have seen, the New York Times had many opportunities to make a way more impactful argument regarding the failures of policy and the implied failures of philanthropy. There are numerous reasons why modern philanthropy is just as broken a system as the American government.